Okay, finally, how are you today? As usual, just a moment of silence. Hey, by the way, does it make me look better? No? Then why do I? Well, just the cosmetics. Nothing serious. I don't have anything to worry about. Don't worry. So, uh, it feels like such a long layoff that it feels like almost a month since we met last time. Who are you, by the way? Like, so, how was your weekend? I mean, weekend, holiday. Good. Thank you. So, picking up what we have left last time, we just finished the difference between the diploid and haploid, if you still remember. I don't expect you still remember that, of course. But so, as a like organism who are involved in the sexual reproduction, we kind of change our form from diploid to haploid, although the stage where we remain as a haploid is very brief and only within very specific type of body part. Okay, that's what we call the gamete, sex cells like a sperm and eggs. Specific, special naming for such different type of cells we called gamete. G-A is there, of course. Right. So there are only two types of gametes exist in our world. Either the male gamete, which we happen to call sperm, and female gamete, which we usually happen to call egg. Okay, just moving the subject into the evolution and transmission of our whole genome information. So the importance of this reproduction is through which we transmit our whole genetic information to the next generation. And if you still remember the relationship between evolution and the activity of so-called reproduction, whether it doesn't matter whether it's a sexual way of reproduction or asexual way of reproduction, the evolution, because we usually view this evolution the mode of evolution. Hello. The mode of evolution uh, is carried out through some special event called natural selection, if you recall. And in order to do so, this reproduction and through which generating diversity is very essential. We went over already this. Okay, why this generating diversity through mutation? When do those mutations occur? Also, everywhere, every day you'd respond, but actually the most, the event that the mutation occur so frequently is when we try to divide. Because what do we have to do just right before the cell division? That is one very important task we should not neglect before. Every time we try to split as a single cell, okay, or it doesn't matter whether it's a multicellular organism, every time you try to divide, when you contemplate dividing, let's divide, then that is a first prerequisite before you actually jump into the act of cell division, which is, what do you think? She's not here. Okay, that so so no one is going to ask. I am an answer since she's absent. Uh, hmm? Yeah, duplicate your genome. we call DNA replication. DNA has to be replicated, otherwise you would be in big trouble, because you have, let's say you have 100 amount of your gene. If you neglect, hey, what the heck? I mean, I'm going to just split into two. Then you, all of a sudden, you became the entity of only 50, which means you will lose instantly. You will lose the half of your whole genome. No one can survive by simply losing even 2% or 3% of your what you used to have. Not to mention 50%. So DNA replication is extremely important things that you need to take care of before. Every time you want to divide, then the thing you have to do first is a DNA replication. Okay. So that's DNA replication and the cell division is just always tightly linked. But the funny thing is, every time you try to DNA replicate, then you make a lot of mistakes. Just like every time you try to type, you always make some typographical error. You don't? Good for you, but I do every time. Yeah. So even if you get a tremendous help from those programs like the spell checker, still you make some very subtle mistake. And that's what this cell, the machinery for the DNA replication does. Yeah. Even if actually, wonderful thing is this cellular machinery for DNA replication also is equipped with something, the mechanism very similar to this, the spelling check program. They check mistake and then correct. Even so, we do have certain basal rate of mistake during this copying procedure. DNA replication is simply just copying your original, the information stored, recorded in your DNA sequence, okay? And then you simply exactly copying. And everybody, including this enzyme machinery, makes this horrible mistake in misincorporating some ingredient which you are not supposed to bring in to generate copy. So that's the ultimate source of mutation. So the diversity is, so there are many different ways you can speed up the frequency of a mutation, rate of mutation. Like to name a few, like cigarette smoking, though a nice habit that I've been indulging in for quite a long years. Like, but fortunately, I was able to quit something like 20 years ago, so now I'm okay. But that one is one such example that's through which you can highly increase the incidence of the mutation, or you can just try to live near the nuclear power plant very close to, then you can obviously increase. Or something you can try to eat some unhealthy, very unhealthy food every day, like everyday French fries and hamburger like me, but then you can also increase. But I cannot stop eating French fries. That is my favorite food. So that's something that I cannot sacrifice anyway, no matter what. So anyway, so that mutation will generate eventually some differences among different individuals, and that is the actually background for which this Mother Nature will have their playing function to select some of them, not all of them, but only small portion of the individuals who happens to have or happens to express or show some trait. Remember this word trait. The trait that happens to be fit into that particular circumstances. Doesn't mean that necessarily that trait was superior to others who didn't get selected. No, it is nothing about, it's nothing to do with the actual quality of the trait. It's just totally based on luck. This is bad luck. And you are the descendant of the good luck carrying, good luck trait carrying your ancestors. So anyway, uh, we went over several times about this species concept and the traits. Okay, species is distinguished by their own representative characters, or we can like express or recognize as some specific trait. Okay, but those traits only stay within the boundary of the one single species. This is because only within this species the gene exchange can occur. Gene flow, gene cannot go across beyond this species boundaries. So even if you had some, even if you develop or even if you somehow evolve, although we should not refer the terminology of evolution as the individual basis, but let's say you were able to evolve some kind of very nice trait. That trait, it's a matter of time that trait could freely be exchanged among the members of your the same species through what? Sexual reproduction, right? However, this species variation, how did we define this species concept? That those group of organisms, they can interbreed, which means within ourselves, we can only exchange our genes. We cannot exchange our genes with those chimpanzees. Okay, no matter how much I love one individual chimpanzee, there is no way I can do so. So this trait will only stay in this boundary of species. It's just defining concept. So we the other way of describing it as a reproductive isolation is a term. Okay, so if we try to summarize this processes of evolution like this, then there is always the first it starts with the population of organisms. Population. Remember, population. Definition of population is what? All those group of individuals, okay, belonging to one same species is the population, right? So that happens in a single population. Why I always make this a stupid mistake? Am I still nervous at this point? Yeah, you could do that. So this genetic variation now, hopefully, every one of you can understand the source of this genetic variation. Where did it occur? What is the source of genetic variation? Through reproduction. In the course of reproduction, you generate inevitable, unavoidable mutation from which different traits can arise. So having this genetic variation is the key. Why? Why is that such an important thing to have initially, to have this genetic variation? Because remember, this whole evolution can go through this particular process we recognize as a natural selection. Okay? So in order to do so, what is the so the unit for this modern nature to select, to exert this selection force, to begin it, you have to provide some variation for which, okay, you, and you, and you, that's it. Thank you for coming. And that's it, close the door. Kind of natural selection. But also, equally important parameter is this: overproduction of this offspring. So, why? So, as to create this particular condition, which we call competition. Without competition, everybody will be selected. So, these resources, nature can provide a certain amount of like comfortness in the form of food and other shelters and other environment resources. We collectively call them resources, but the resources is always limiting things against the whole total population. If you are living in an ideal environment where everybody can enjoy the maximum amount of these natural resources, so that everybody can have a, what's important thing is this. This particular thing is the one determine who is going to be so-called a winner and who is going to be a loser. Although I hate that kind of distinction. That is not true. Winner or loser, no. What did I say about this? It's just a matter of whether you are lucky or you are unfortunate one. It's not something that you are the one who won, or you are the one who lost. No. But this reproductive success is the one that actually that manifest the outcome of this natural selection. So those who have a better adaptation will be able to produce more number of offspring. That means reproductively successful, more successful than the others. And eventually, if what happens if you succeed in reproduction, eventually your gene will dominate eventually the whole population. So that's kind of the playing game, the rule of the game in the evolution. So because of that, if there is no competition exists in the beginning to begin with, there's no point. This particular game cannot be played. But always in practice, always these two things exist. Always there is a variation, and always there will be some competition due to competition for the resources, always occur in practice. Then these differences in reproductive success occur, and only those who can display a better adaptation ability will be able to reproduce more and more. It's the procedure through which the revolution occurs. Okay. Now, but let's try to compare two. At the time, there were two leading theories about this to explain the process of evolution. The first one was formulated by this renowned naturalist or scientist, Lamarck, Jean Baptiste Lamarck. I don't know. I may not be able to correctly pronounce his name, but anyway, he was a very famous naturalist, and he should be at least credited by formulating the first reasonable explanation on how the evolution might occur. And this is this diagram actually illustrates that famous the giraffe neck hypothesis theory proposed by this gentleman. So here, the important premise of his theory of evolution is this. This individual adaptation effort, which we, on the other hand, we recognize this as an acquired trait. So his basal important critical premise is that acquired trait can be transmitted into next generation. What do you think? So here, if somebody asks you to explain this figure, how would you go by? So it is one version of explanation for why this giraffe in these days happen to have such a long, gracious, beautiful neck. was because of this food source. For some reason, maybe some climate change or whatever, so all those food available at the lower level are all gone. So the only foods available were on high top, on treetop. So those who could reach to the height were able to get this food. So what happened? Then every giraffe really tries so hard to reach. And gee, I wish I could learn those techniques. It would be such a nice technique so that I can reach up to like this. So if you keep trying anything every day, try to reach, then you will be one day be able to reach something like on high. That was his theory. So everybody eventually was able to display such a elegant long neck. So what's the problem? What is the problem in his theory? Although at first it may be plausible to at least to some of you, but if we were to criticize his theory as incorrect, that's what nowadays present days school teaches in the classroom. The reason why this Lamarck's theory of evolution was incorrect is because blah blah blah. What? What would you point out? Which part? That's this, the acquired trait. Okay, you may be able to find. So if that is just a big if this particular individual giraffe was able to achieve the heightened, lengthened neck by his or her individual effort. But another big premise of this theory is that that trait, we call it an acquired trait. Why? This acquired trait is something that this individual has acquired through its own effort during his lifetime. Okay? Just like you go to the gym and do all those workout, and you may be able to build up some nice muscle, but that doesn't mean that when you have a baby, your baby will born as a super baby, like with this whole muscle thing, just because you have it. That is what we call acquired trait. So that we should be able to realize that, oh no, acquired trait cannot be transmitted to your next offspring. You just studied so hard, so you just accumulated so much knowledge, but that doesn't mean that your baby will born as a scholar. Okay? So that is another example of such an acquired trait. And general consensus is acquired trait cannot be transmitted. So acquired trait is not heritable. So even if let's say this one in his generation or in her generation was able to achieve up to this point, but this individual giraffe's offspring, babies, should start from the very beginning. So there won't be any, okay, the increase in average increase the size, the length of the neck because of this. So that was a critical flaw of giraffe's theory of an evolution. Then what about, there is another version offering the explanation of this giraffe's neck by Charles Darwin, who we generally recognize him as the one who provided this theory of evolution through natural selection correctly. Okay. So this is the version that we teach in the classroom, his version of theory of evolution. So let's try to compare and contrast. So this is an illustration of Darwin's the evolution version. So can you explain this figure on your own words? What is the main difference, the big major difference in this Darwin's explanation compared with the previous Lamarck's one? Yes? Hmm? Which means, as opposed to individual different giraffes' effort to lengthen snack, but there was already variation present in the first place is the big difference. So here already in this population, just like yourself, everyone is different. Okay? So your difference, your particular different trait may not be able to have an opportunity to demonstrate your true color ability because of you are not fortunate. But in this case, so normally, let's say, uh-oh, let's say this particular taller giraffe already exists. There was taller and shorter giraffe, but this taller doesn't give you anything, any benefit under that initial circumstances. So what? Oh, you look so stupid. That was it. But then now things has drastically changed in that this whole lower ground foods are all gone. Now is the time for me to show up and showcase my true ability. Don't I look nice and impressive? Look, I can reach this high and then get the food for you. Okay, so now this taller neck trait is able to produce some reproductive success because it can provide you more food, right? Under that particular environmental change. Now then, it will be natural to mate one male taller giraffe and also female taller giraffe, so that the outcome of that, the result of that marriage would be reproducing and producing taller, even taller baby giraffe. So it keep the trends keep going toward producing larger, taller giraffe, and eventually everybody in the population. What did I say about this evolution? Eventually, that trait that initially selected for by nature in this process will eventually dominate the entire population. That's what happened. Is it? Yeah, very something that makes sense, plausible explanation. So that's why every biology classroom in schools teach this version as a correct explanation for how this natural selection go. Okay, until now, yeah. So the big premise is the acquired trait cannot be transmitted. Is the big thing, big condition. So. That is something that nicely organized explanation version, sentence text version of my explanation just. However, later probably I will try to bring up some new revolutionary theory which claims that, oh no, actually this acquired trait sometimes can be transmitted into next generation. So not necessarily that the original old version of Lamarck evolutionary theory is 100% incorrect. No, you have to think again. Things keep changing. That's the beauty, and that's actually the thing that I like the most in this field of science, and in particular the biology. So whole new information after as a result of a new learning. Okay. always keep flowing in. So in these days, we actually, some, some trait, some traits can be obtained through this environmental effect that we can define as a so-called this acquired trait. So in some rare, although it's rare, but in some specific conditions, for example, some kind of a trait that you obtained through your individual efforts, like building muscles or anything like that, that can be even passed on to your sons and daughters, depending on some specific circumstances. That's very interesting discovery, right, these days. There's a new horizon in the field of genetics. So I'm going to introduce that concept later on. In previous semesters, I actually introduced that concept right after this Darwin theory, but at this stage, a lot of students were not ready for understanding such things. So I will put that off till later. Okay? So that was it. So that's the end of this first chapter. So thank you for coming. So you can go today, right? I'm kidding. I wish I could, but so switching into so chapter 2, we are going to take a look at more seriously about the whole thing, the origin. So it's also related with a lot of times with this concept of evolution too. Yeah. A lot of people actually wondered and asked me, a lot of my colleagues, uh, like professors, why do you teach? Why do you teach evolution in this class? But my answer is, if I don't do at this point, most of the students don't even have any chance, even if they are here in this university for some reason, even they are the major in biology department, the opportunity for them to be exposed to this concept of an evolution is surprisingly limited. So even if they go into the like a sophomore, junior, and senior in their major, there's no evolution. I mean, no classroom teaching this evolution is actually offered in the department because in this era, most people consider the among these different branches of biology, usually they consider this particular what this some of the other fields like molecular biology, biochemistry, or genetics, and those things are the one actually pays off. So most of those scientists they focus on only that narrow specific areas, but always this evolution is always equally important, maybe even more important. So I myself, even as a molecular biologist, still cannot ignore this evolution concept. So I hope you also carry this the significance and importance of this origin and evolution. So anyway, to explain how we began the life forms, I mean, where was the eraser? So do I have to travel all the way down to So in the beginning, what was the first? So do you still remember this Luca concept of Luca, the first our ancestor, the last universal common ancestor from which every individual organism arose? So to provide an explanation on this life's origin for the first time, in the first time, what was it to generate all this life? There were two versions existed in the 19th century, 18th centuries. So until actually in the mid 19th centuries, these two versions had like a conflict of this, the direction of the origin to explaining the origin existed until eventually here the biogenesis theory proved to be the correct one. So spontaneous generation states that this life arose spontaneously. Really? How? Biogenesis, life can only arise from existing old one through what we recognize in these days as a reproduction, right? So if you were presented with these two versions of a theory now, then most of you would select, hey, are you stupid? Biogenesis, you can easily pick up, right? However, on those days, actually, the spontaneous generation was the predominant one. Because why? Because of the religious background, the cultural, religious, the Christianity, cultural, religious background strongly favored this idea. Okay. Why? Because this spontaneous generation, like what underlies this theory of a spontaneous generation is creation by Almighty God. So life can only be aroused by this divine intervention whenever the conditions, right conditions are met. What is the right condition? You pray hard, you behave nice, then you will be blessed with this creation of new life form. Is probably this doctrine. You may just laugh at these things, but those people at that time were not actually stupid either, but because of this cultural background, most of them believe them. So anyway, those who clearly demonstrate the correctness of this biogenesis theory was Louis Pasteur, who was actually not only he was like a really great medical doctor, but also he was the great microbiologist, and he was man of ability. And so he, this is his actual photograph working in his laboratory. So not only did he make a great contribution and saved a lot of lives by inventing this vaccine, he was the one who actually invented this vaccination against all this viral infection and microbial infections. But also because he is an expert in this microbiology, like no wonder why he was able to invent this the method of the vaccination, because he knew well about this little microorganisms presence. Okay? Although it's not visible, but there are plenty of other life forms floating around in the air as something that his insight. So he invented this particular flask, swan neck flask, to demonstrate this theory of biogenesis. So basic principle, the reason why he used this weird shaped flask is, hey, so what happened? For example, you pour nutrient-rich broth at the bottom of this flask. Now, if you let it this way, let's sit with the top open, without closing the cap. If you just let's sit this whole nutrient-rich broth for like some period of time, what's going to happen? Some growth, life forms will grow in here because this is a nutrient-rich broth. And what's the source of this new life form? So people will argue, okay, hey, new life form arose here in this. So isn't it the proof of spontaneous generation. There's nothing here, then spontaneous life form was generated, new life form was created. So that's some kind of proof, evidence for the spontaneous generation. How can you disprove such a thing? So that's why he boiled this. So the reason why you see some life forms observed in this process is because there was a contaminant in presence already in this process. But if you sterilize this by boiling, then there wouldn't be any occurrence of new life form here, okay, which will now probably indirectly prove the biogenesis theory. But the big problem is this. So the second step that he needs to show is the new life form can come from the outside, the external source of contamination to initiate this new growth. How can you prove? How can you demonstrate such things? So by comparing these two things, for example, if you have this open end, then new life form will occur. If you let somehow make this flask very difficult to have any outside airborne contamination, then clearly you can make these two distinct contrasting results. One having contaminant origin of new life form. The other, you don't have any contamination, so you don't have any new life form. So that is the reason why he invented this shape of swan neck, this flask, so that if there is any source of contamination from outside, all those airborne contaminants will be trapped at the bottom of this long flask. So it will not be able to reach to the bottom of the nutrient source. So there won't be any. So at this point, you may actually wonder why instead he didn't try to have any stop. Okay, so that in the first place, there was no source of the contamination coming into. What was the reason, do you think, that he didn't try, but always let this opening of the flask unplugged, so that always this airborne contaminant source can come into at least contact? Why? What do you think the reason? If you simply stop the opening, and yeah, the experiment would have been simply very boring. Nothing will happen, no matter what. It will stay the same. However, if you make this at least the gate for this contamination to come open, then you can show the different outcomes by simply. So in this case, you have the contaminant at this bottom. So if you want to show actually there was a contaminant, then all you gotta do is what? Tilt the flask so that this liquid can make physical contact with this contaminant. Then you will make a big difference in the result of the experiment. Then you will be able to show, see, this is the contaminant source, okay, which was not present at first. So that is the reason why he had this S-shaped flask, long flask, and also left this opening wide open to the outside contaminant. So actually, he did. When he tilted this flask, then this nutrient broth make the physical contact, and then later, it was just a matter of time, like within a couple of days, you had all the growth in it. Like, what was the nature of all this growth? These microorganisms that a lot of people at the time was shocked to recognize them for the first time through microscope. Now, so the case closed. So new life form can only begin from the pre-existing source of a life form. But then you have a big problem. Okay, fine. Biogenesis theory is correct. Then how in the world you're able to start from the beginning? It's such a big paradox. Yeah. No one can explain even. Although scientists offer their version of this to resolve this paradox, they offer some very stupid. I don't really believe that's a stupid, but to most of you, it actually looks so stupid. And so this is a really big problem. Yeah, we all know that new life form can be generated by only from the existing ones. But when we think back to the very beginning, then the origin of that very beginning is really, really difficult to explain. It's a problem. So, uh, accordingly, this biogenesis has to adopt some circumstantial, only one time only special biogenesis theory. So only in the beginning there was a the spontaneous genesis. The first event was spontaneous. From then on, everything else, the rest of them was all biogenesis. Can you take it? No, I can't. If you try to explain something, at least you have to be consistent. This is just BS. You start spontaneously, and then once you establish yourself, and then from now on, everything must be biogenesis. Okay, how can that happen? But that is the only version the scientists can offer as the origin of life. So at that point, you may actually, well, then there must be God initially created the first life form. You may. But to do so, then you will face soon the bigger, huge, much larger problem of like requiring a lot of more explanation. So that is not also very smart idea either. So let's just stay in this version until someone who is much smarter that is able to resolve this whole problem. We are not there yet, though. So the first origin that we claim that was made through this spontaneous generation, we call it as a chemical evolution. So all those non-living inorganic things, spontaneously life form was created, is the whole bottom line of that chemical evolution. Then once you succeed in making the first type of life form as a cell, okay, I just kind of hinted that thing in the first lecture already, like inorganic material somehow gathered and then was able to form organic material within the boundary of a cell membrane is the beginning, starting point of a new cell. And from then on, the cell is able to reproduce. So from this on, everything must go through this biogenesis is what we can explain. So anyway, so thereafter, once you have the first type of life, then this first type of life was able to reproduce through this cell division and the genetics. Then we recognize this event procedure as a biological evolution, or AKA Darwinian evolution. Okay. So this chemical evolution states that In the beginning, there were only non-living materials like this. So all this non-living material, hey, where is my Apple Pencil? Oh, okay. So all this, somehow this non-living material, inorganic material, was spontaneously able to form a little more complicated organic material. And from then on, this organic material were able to form themselves, gather themselves to form a little more complex organic material. This more complex organic material happens to be the ones that we are more familiar with, like amino acids, okay, or nucleotides, or something like this. And with this ingredient, now more complex molecules like DNA, RNA, protein were able to be built. Then these complex macromolecules were able to gather themselves to form some clump. Okay. And spontaneously, there was a boundary like cell membrane. And the key thing is, through this procedure, you must have captured this genetic material, the DNA. Otherwise, this event would have been very short-term event. The importance of capturing this genetic material in this like building, spontaneous building procedure is that what? Once you obtained this genetic material like DNA within your boundary, so your boundary is defined by what? Cell membrane. Cell membrane, though, is probably one of the easiest things to explain because cell membrane can be formed spontaneously. Cell membranes, in the water especially, in the watery environment, if you have enough of this cell membrane building ingredient, then they can spontaneously form this barrier because of their very mysterious law of physics. Yeah, that's what happens. So cell membrane, to explain, hey, there was a spontaneous cell membrane was built, is very easy relatively. But you have to have grabbed some genetic material inside so that this genetic material from then on was able to dictate, okay, produce orders. Hey, do this, do that, and then generate some more complex molecule, and then was able to also reproduce. The key to having this genetic material is the genetic material is the only material that is able to reproduce themselves, like duplicate, DNA replication, and also cell division. They can coordinate cell division. This is what we somehow speculate. Remember, this is totally speculation. No one was there. It's just a speculation, logical thinking from all those, the gathering of all this knowledge from chemistry, physics, and biology is the version that you get to listen in this classroom. So it can change. It can be wrong, of course. So that's the beauty of science. Every time someone came up and, hey, you're wrong. See why? Hey, here is a proof. Then as long as we recognize that proof as a correct one, then no matter how old, no matter how everybody, no matter how many people actually were sold into, that doesn't matter. That whole old theory will just collapse. And then new idea will come into place. That's the beauty of science. So look, there is a big problem. So here today only, if you can understand this concept of second law of thermodynamics, probably I will be happy. So one theoretical big barrier about this spontaneous building up, starting from simpler inorganic molecule, the next step you get to build a little more complex, but still simple organic molecule. From there, you get to build a more complex organic molecule until you are able to establish so-called big macromolecules. Examples of such macromolecule include cell membrane, protein, and DNA, and now you have everything, okay, with which you can start your new life form as a cell. But each step is non-spontaneous reaction. I have already introduced, there are two different types of chemical reaction. One is a spontaneous and the other one is a non-spontaneous reaction, wasn't it? Yeah. What's the characteristic of a spontaneous reaction? Remember? Spontaneous reaction always go from bigger, more complex molecule to less complex, smaller, simpler. But now you are going backward here. You start from very simple and trying to build much more complex molecule. And each step, it will be a big challenge. I'm not saying this is impossible, because always whenever you're trying to do this non-spontaneous chemical reaction, all you gotta do is what? Provide. What did I say? Open your wallet. If you have to go through this non-spontaneous reaction, you have to open your wallet, right? So you have to provide the energy. As long as you are able to provide energy in correct form, you can carry out this so-called non-spontaneous reaction. The definition of a spontaneous reaction is nothing special, but simply it doesn't have any energy requirement, so that if you let them sit there, it will happen on its own. You don't have to worry about it. That's the beauty of a spontaneous reaction. But the other direction, still you can achieve if you provide the energy. But the question is, who provided this energy in the correct form? Once again, you have to call God. Was that you? That is the thing. So yeah, this thing is possible. However, this whole ingredient must have been under very extremely special environmental circumstances, so that this provision of energy can also occur spontaneously. But still, these scientists are so stubborn. They're still with this whole kind of unthinkables, but still scientists believe that, yeah, that is the thing that must have happened to generate the first type of life. Believe it or not. Because then otherwise, if you don't believe this, then there is only other alternative. So it's your choice. But to accept that is also very difficult for a scientist, because it takes a lot of unexplainable thing must occur is another thing. But anyway, okay, so let's stay, at least in this classroom, let's stay with these scientists. So for example, scientists believe this kind of particular environment might have been the one who generated this opportunity like this. But no one knows. And the second then obstacle to overcome for this proponent of spontaneous generation in the first place is this: that if that was the case, if the first type of cell was able to form by itself, okay, then why don't you see the second or third, the fourth spontaneous generation of this new cell from non-living in these days? So there was only something one time only event that occurred something like 3 or 4 billion years ago. That was it. Why? How come? Why? That is also the very difficult question. So this clever, sly scientist came up with this. What? Reducing atmosphere. So this current atmosphere is the opposite to this so-called reducing atmosphere. Reducing atmosphere is the one condition under which no oxygen is present. So oxygen is actually always the villain that disrupt everything. So in the presence of oxygen, oxygen will take away everything in the, so to speak, in a chemical reaction. So when oxygen is so abundant like this environment, any spontaneous chemical reaction would be much, much more difficult to occur spontaneously because oxygen will always try to interfere. Hey, what are you guys doing? Can I have this? Oxygen is very, very strong and greedy in taking some of the reaction, the core chemical ingredient of a chemical reaction. So you try to avoid oxygen all the way possible. But in the beginning, when there was no oxygen in the early days of Earth's evolution, so building or forming this type of reaction, chemical reaction, which require this non-spontaneous reaction, would have been more like readily possible is what the scientists believe. But personally, I don't really give too much weight on this reducing versus oxidizing atmosphere as a big difference maker. But that's what, at least that's what they try to offer. So reducing atmosphere by definition is this. So this is more favorable to conduct this non-spontaneous, in other words, anabolic reactions. So in these days where the oxygens are everywhere, it would have been much more difficult. So that's the reason why you don't get to see the second or third event of this spontaneous cell generation. I don't believe it. But anyway, that's what. So another thing is this. The first genetic material was not DNA, but RNA was. This is something called the RNA world hypothesis. So why the RNA is so like something different? And what's the problem of considering DNA as a genetic material? What's RNA and what's DNA? DNA is this. In this cartoon, DNA is this, our genetic material, containing all this important information, genetic information. Okay. This building block select. So, but the RNA, on the other hand, is kind of messenger, playing a second fiddle, delivering, taking some of the part of this information from DNA and then deliver this information to actually do, to carry out the actual work, which is protein synthesis. So RNA is the one who actually is being used in actual protein making. This DNA provides the actual information, instruction. Hey, this is how you make the particular protein. Is always scored or stored in DNA somewhere, some part. And then RNA copy that information and then go to the protein building machinery, chef. I will just compare it as chef. Hey, this is a recipe for making pizza. Have you ever made a pizza? This is how you do it. And then the chef will follow this instruction, which came directly from DNA, and then voila, actually hand out, hey, this is a pizza. How does it taste? So that's the relationship among DNA, RNA, and protein. So in other words, you may consider RNA is not as important as DNA, because DNA is the genetic material, but RNA is just like errand boy, bellboy, like. But when I say, hey, actually in the beginning, RNA was the genetic material, DNA was nothing. Okay, I will just quickly try to finish this. This figure probably try to explain the problem of having DNA as the genetic material. So now I have already explained the relationship between DNA, RNA, and protein. This is what it is. So in order for DNA as a first time, okay, let's say you, as a DNA, you're trying to do this, your first job ever in a cell, spontaneously made cell, you are trying to do this first job ever over protein making. You have to go through the RNA intermediate, and then from them, finally, you will be able to produce your first protein ever. But at each step, what it takes is what? The enzyme. Enzyme to catalyze each step. And those enzymes are made of what? Proteins. You don't even get to produce your first protein ever. And how can you have this enzyme to catalyze? You have a problem. And then would RNA make any difference? Yes, because RNA has a chemical property of being served as a genetic material, because chemically it is very similar to DNA. So it can function, everything DNA does, it can do. Same. But also at the same time, RNA can also function as some kind of protein-like enzyme function too. Why? Because RNA can have many different shapes. Shape is something difference maker. Different shape. Shape dictates the function in biology. Okay. So, unlike DNA, this RNA can fold into different or very unique shape, and some of those unique shape can function as a protein-like enzyme. So in other words, in the first days of a first cell, if RNA was the genetic material, it would have been able to function both as a genetic material and enzyme. So you don't need any enzyme that DNA would have required. Is the key theory. What is the evidence? Yeah, there is an evidence actually. In these days, nowadays, some RNAs displays this dual function. So those are called ribozyme. The word coined by RNA. The full name of RNA is a ribonucleic acid plus enzyme. Then you coin this together to call ribozyme. So this is an RNA actually function as a protein-like enzyme, as a ribozyme. And we do have them in our cell. So those ribozymes must have been the strong critical player in the first type of a form. These two scientists it was something like 1985 or something, long time ago, but I still vividly remember when these two scientists won Nobel Prize together. They were working in two different universities. One is in Yale and the other one is at University of Colorado when I was in the US, and they won both. They were working independently because of their work on discovering the ribozyme. Okay, I see your frustration on your face. Okay, hey, what's going on? This is 17th. Okay, so I will quit now to continue on Wednesday, pick up Wednesday. Okay, see you.